Hello, in this video I'll show you how to plant your raised garden bed. This is the third video in a series about raised bed gardening. First, I showed how to build raised garden beds, and second, we showed how to fill the raised garden beds. Before I started planting in the raised garden bed, first I watered down all of the soil. I watered the soil pretty heavily, and then I let the water soak into the soil for at least an hour before I started digging. I used my trowel to dig a hole slightly larger than the soil that the plant is already in. I dig the hole to the necessary depth for whatever I'm planting. I started out by planting some tomato plants. Tomato plants are recommended to plant really deep because there's small hairs all along the length of the stem which are able to grow roots. The stronger and bigger our root system, the larger plant that will grow. Since I was planting the tomato plant really deep, I removed the bottom couple rows of leaves so that the leaves wouldn't be underground. Then I pushed the soil back in to fill whatever was left of the hole and gently pressed it down. To safely remove the plant from our plastic container without damaging it, I gently squeezed the edges. This will release the soil from the plastic. Then I grab the base of the stem as close to the dirt as possible and gently lift up. If I feel any resistance, then I squeeze the edges again. The roots on this plant look pretty good and not bound up, but if I see roots that are really compacted together, I try to loosen them up a bit before planting it into the soil. Here's a view of the tomato stem that I have cleaned up of the lower leaves, so you can see exactly how deep I'm placing this in the garden bed. You can also see the little hairs along the stem that will form a really strong root system. Here I'm planting some basil between the two tomato plants. Basil is super compatible with tomatoes and it helps keep insects away. I had some resistance pulling this out of the pot, so I ended up flipping it upside down and squeezing the bottom to help get the basil to come out. It's really important to think about what plants you're planting in a raised garden bed. You want to make sure they're compatible with each other and that they're not prone to the same diseases. In my two raised garden beds, I'm planting tomatoes, cucumbers, basil, thyme, and marigolds. It sounds like a lot, and it definitely is a lot. All of these plants are compatible with each other, and they promote healthy growth. If you're planting other plants and not sure what's compatible, there's a ton of charts online that share that information. Now, I'll talk a little bit about exactly how many plants I'm putting into my raised garden bed. These plants are all still pretty small, but once they start to grow, it's definitely going to overcrowd my beds. That's okay at this point because I'm planning to build another garden bed. In fact, I'll link that video here once it's ready. I decided to plant all of the plants now while I'm still working on the other garden bed because I wanted the plants to have a better chance of growing than what they'll have in the plastic containers. With them being in the garden bed, they'll have better soil conditions and more water. Once my other bed is ready, I'll remove the extras that don't fit in the garden bed. I also recommend looking up the appropriate spacing for each plant that you're planting to make sure that you give it the room it needs to grow. For example, each tomato plant needs about 2 feet of room. I planted the tomatoes and cucumbers really deep in the soil because that's what they're recommended for, but the marigolds and the basil I planted much closer to the top of the soil. I dug the hole deep enough so that the top of the soil that the plants are already in are even with the soil of the bed. As a reminder, I'm planting all of these plants after the latest frost date in my area. After I have all the plants planted, I water them into place. I don't show the full video here, but I water each plant for at least 10 seconds. Deep watering for each of the plants is what is going to promote a really healthy root system. The deeper that the water reaches into the soil, the deeper that the roots are going to be incentivized to grow, which helps us have a healthier plant. The cucumbers weren't ready in my area yet when the tomatoes and other plants were, so about a week later I came back to plant the cucumbers. While I'm planting the cucumbers, I want to talk a little bit more about watering. In the prior clip, you saw me using the shower head to water all the plants. I did this the first time so that it would rinse off the dirt or anything else that was on the plants from when I had picked them up at the store. However, when I water the plants on a regular basis, I direct the water stream at the root and try and avoid getting too much water on the leaves or flowers. Avoiding extra water on the leaves is especially important for plants like tomatoes, which are prone to blight. It's also really important to water the plants regularly. Infrequent or sporadic watering can lead to difficulties for the roots to absorb calcium. This will prevent them from growing well. Before I can plant the last cucumber, I need to dig up this marigold. Again, I had placed this marigold in the garden bed, knowing that it would later be removed. Since it took a full week before the cucumbers were ready after I purchased the marigolds, I didn't want the marigold to be in its plastic container for a week. After I dug up the marigold, I planted it in a different garden bed that I was able to prepare during the past week. Now that the cucumbers are planted, I went ahead and watered them in. I also watered all the other plants in the bed. You can see here how I'm directing the water stream to be at the roots rather than soaking the entire plant in water. Thanks for watching this video on how to plant your raised garden bed, the third part in a series about raised bed gardening. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and as always, like and subscribe to see more content.